All right, so here is my quick run through of the demo for people watching this back on how to assemble our training wheels rig. It is just a lot of different iterations of moving pivot points and using groups to create this entirely posable fellow. So we're going to set the pivot point for the foot. We're going to group it together with this and set the pivot point at the knee. We'll then take this group together with this leg and put the pivot point here at the hip. And then separately, we will join these, the arm or the hand and the forearm into a forearm group. And then we'll join that group with the bicep for a full arm group. And then we will duplicate our completed groups. All right, so step one, as we've already done here in class, is to start with the foot object by itself. So the foot object by itself should have its pivot point down here at the ankle. If you need to see inside of your objects, the simplest way is to go into wireframe visibility mode, or wireframe display mode. Hitting 4, 5 will return you to shading. So 4 to see through. When you're moving a pivot point, you only need to hold down D, but in our case, for today, we are snapping it to vertices, so you want to hold down D and hold down V, both keys. And then you can grab, in this case, grab the pivot point in the center and drag it right onto the bottom of the foot. And that's going to leave us here at the ankle. So now, if I wanted to, I could rotate this foot at the ankle. There we go. So that's step one. Step two is to connect the foot, and I'm going to hold shift and click on the calf, and these two should organize together and rotate around the ankle here at the end of the thigh. So now with both of these objects selected, Command G for group, and as always when you create a group, it will try and create the group pivot point down at the origin. So if it goes missing, your pivot point is moved down here to the bottom. I'm just going to hold D and V, put it on the outside of my knee here. A quick note for you folks is you can put things in the center of the screen to make it easier to zoom into them, as well as rotate around them. So I can rotate like this, move this up here, rotate underneath it, and pan this way. And rotate up a little bit so I can hit 4, and now I have easy access holding D and V to get this group's pivot point onto the bottom of the thigh. So again, it should be able to move the entire calf and foot as one group as the foot and calf together. So if you ever lose a group and you need to reselect it, say for connecting it with this thigh, I could just click something in the group. So I'll click on my calf, hit the up arrow on the keyboard. That will select you a group that it's in. In this case, boom, I got it. I will hold shift and add the thigh to my selection. So I'm grouping the thigh object with the calf and foot group. And so when I group those all together, now the entire leg is one. Move my pivot point up to the center of my hip as best I can. Let me go to solid mode so I can see a little better. I think I need to go down one. Whoopsie. D, V, pivot point, down one. Okay, so this should be on the front middle of my thigh. And so now, if I go into my side view here, I can hit F and just double check that, just visually. Okay, perfect. We are right here in the center. Good. Go over here. Zoom in on my thigh area here. 4 for wireframe. And unlike what we've been doing for the other ones, when we hold down D and V for this one, instead of grabbing the pivot point itself and moving it, you are going to instead hold down D and V and use the arrow to push the pivot point and align it with this vertex. So with that, my group's pivot point ends up in the middle of the leg, and so it'll rotate there. If I did the other way, and I moved my pivot point here by grabbing the center, when I go back into perspective, all I've done is now aligned it to the pivot, or align the pivot point to this vertex on the outside. So that's why when you do, I undid it, crap. Boom. Make sure when you do this step, you use the arrows and push it back. Okay, so that's one completed group. And you can check it by, can I wiggle this? Great. Undo, up arrow. Does that group move both of them? Yes, it does. Undo, up arrow. Does that move everything? Yes, it does. Very good. Same stuff for the arm. You don't have to worry about the hand, so we'll skip that and just select our forearm here. Command G as in group. And again, the pivot point down here at the bottom. So we'll just DV, move it up here onto the elbow somewhere. 4 for wireframe mode. Get a good view of the bottom. Oh, whoopsie. And the manipulator. Move our pivot point to the bottom of the bicep. Again, if you need to reselect your group, select your forearm. Up arrow should select the group. And then I will hold shift and select the bicep. I will then group all of this together. Get my pivot point from down here. Holding D and V to move it up onto the arm. Zoom in. And then let me go shaded here. I'm going to go into my side view. That is unfortunately my front view. Sorry, my bad. And I can see here that I need to move my pivot point. Whoopsie, undo that. Move it to the center middle in the front view. Boom. And then in my side view, come on up here. Same concept. I want to use D and V, but the arrow to push it back into the middle. And now my pivot point will be inside of my object. So now, if I grab this group, it will do that. If I grab the forearm group, I can do like this, right? So now I have 2 completed groups of body parts. So now I need to make the opposite side of the body, which is great because I don't have to redo all of my work. I will simply select the bicep, for example, hit the up arrow. So that's going to get my whole group for my arm. And I'm going to first duplicate my arm. So I just hit Command D for duplicate. It's already set, you can see. So yep, have a duplicate there. I'm going to immediately group said duplicate. So Command D into Command G. And now my pivot point, as you will see, is set to the origin, which luckily for you is the symmetrical, or the axis of symmetry for this object. But if that were not the case, I could just snap my pivot point to something on the axis of symmetry. So I'll put it on the bottom of the spine, for example. Again, I'm just pointing out it is already on the axis of symmetry, but just showing you for sake of showing you. So now this duplicate in its own group, the pivot point is set to the center. If I look at my move tool, it is telling me that left to right on my screen is the blue axis, which is the Z axis. If this object is existing in scale Z +1, to see it on the opposite side of the model would be to change scale Z to the inverse, to -1. And now it will flip to the opposite side. So again, for the thigh, I could select this, up arrow for the group, Command D as in duplicate to duplicate it, Command G to put the duplicate in a group immediately. If you needed to, on another assignment, You might want to make sure it's on the axis of symmetry. So I'm just going to do that for sake of showing. And then once you are convinced that your duplicate group is on the axis of symmetry, find the axis you are flipping. In our case, it is the positive z. And we want to flip that to the negative z, -1. And now you should have a dude who is entirely posable if you grab the right groups and use the rotate tool. So I'm just grabbing objects, hitting the up arrow to reselect the group. Oh, whoops, I almost moved the object. Bingo. Boom. Boom. You do not need to pose your dude at the end. I just did that. But I will be checking to make sure that your dude is entirely flexible. So thank you for watching. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.